Chairperson Jorgensen.
I am here.
Okay, the record will note that Commissioner Castillo was absent, but advised us he was going to be gone.
Thank you. Staff introductions, please.
Warren Frace, Community Development Director.
Darren Nash, City Planner.
My name is Darcy Delgado, Associate Planner.
Lori Wilson, Assistant Planner.
David Affey, City Engineer.
Julie Dolan, Community Services Director.
Okay, is that all staff?
Tom Fritchie, City Manager.
All right, thank you. All right, I'd like now to open the floor to general public comments from anyone regarding matters that are not on the agenda. Do we have any calls or correspondence on that? Would sound like not, so we will move ahead to the agenda. Yes.
Yes, we do not have any callers for public comment.
All right, thank you. We will move then to, do we have any agenda items proposed to be tabled or rescheduled?
There are none.
All right, thank you. Then we'll proceed with agenda item number 1. It is a continued public hearing from April 28th, 2020 regarding variance 20-01 Market Walk short-term rentals. May we have the staff report?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Commissioner Neal, I will need to recuse myself as we are the contractor. I work for the contractor building the project.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Neal.
Madam Chair, this is Ty Christensen. I will need to recuse myself from this one as well. I'm in a conflict of interest being so close.
All right. Thank you. I believe we still have a quorum. So now we will open to the staff report, please.
All right, Darren Nash will be making the presentation. We're bringing up the presentation online here, so give us 1 second and we'll begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. As you mentioned, this is an item that was continued from the April 28th Planning Commission meeting. It is variance 20-01 for the Paso Market Walk project. The Paso Market Walk project is located at 1803 Spring Street, and tonight we are reviewing the request for a variance to allow the 6 residential units for the project to be short-term rentals. Looking at the vicinity map, the project is the block on Spring Street between 18th and 19th, between the alley and Spring Street. This is a project that was approved by the City Council as reviewed by the Planning Commission as well back in 2017 for a mixed-use project. With the project, there was 6 residential units approved for the project. The issue at hand is the applicant's intent was that the residential units would be short-term rental units. At the time of the review and approval of this project, it was prior to the city's adoption of the short-term rental ordinance. Prior to the short-term rental ordinance, residential units could simply apply for a business license to request the residence to be a short-term rental. After the adoption of the ordinance, one of the regulations that was included in the ordinance was only allowing up to 2 units per parcel for non-hosted short-term rentals. This project started with 4 parcels, and with the development of this project, merged those 4 parcels into one to accommodate the buildings. At the meeting of April 28th, Planning Commission reviewed the project. There was public comments on the project. There was presentation by the applicants, and in the end, the decision, the action by the Planning Commission was to continue the hearing to this meeting tonight to allow the applicant some additional time to take a look at the parking area specifically for the residential units. So the approved as-built parking plan, and I'm going to see if I can blow this up a little bit for you. This was what I'm calling the as-built parking plan. It's as the project was striped out in the field at the time of the meeting on April 28th. There was concerns brought up by neighbors who were able to view the parking that in the manner that it was striped, there was maneuvering conflicts and it was not striped per plan. That was acknowledged by the applicants that night. And the Planning Commission requested that the architect come back with some parking alternatives for a more workable parking arrangement. So since the April 28th meeting, we have had the architect provide some options, and I'm going to run through those fairly quickly with you. The architect is available with this meeting to present, and I will let them get into more detail on the plans, the differences, and the options they're providing. So again, this is the as-built plan. It's my understanding since the April 28th Planning Commission meeting, the striping has been removed out in this parking area, and it's awaiting the parking plan that is discussed tonight. If approved, the applicants would stripe accordingly. Thanks for your patience. We're working on this with this new system, and I'm working on my touch here. So the project was continued to tonight to allow for consideration for some parking options. The plan that's on the screen in a few seconds here will be what we're calling the approved plan. This is the parking plan that was approved with the building permits for the project. So this is taking a look at the 8 parking spaces. It has 4 tandem parking spaces, and this is the plan that was approved. So revised parking options, the architects, M+ architects, have provided 3 options. This option A is the same as the approved plan, but it adds a 9th parking space, still provides for 4 tandem spaces. The 9th space is located right down here next to the handicap space adjacent to the sidewalk. This is the next diagram here. This is also parking option A, just shown in the color. The red or the pinkish shown on the screen is the residential spaces, the 9 spaces, and then the blue is the commercial up off the alley. Option B loses that space number 9 and removes one of the tandem parking areas. So there's 2 tandem parking spaces, spaces 3 and 4, and eliminates the parking space number 9. The project needs to provide the 8 parking spaces for the residential units. So the option A with the 9th space is 1 extra space in the residential area. Then the third option, option C, is removes the 4 tandem spaces, the tandem situation, provides for the 8 spaces in a manner that is a little more open. With the space 2 and 3, it includes the space 3, orients it for an additional space that was a commercial space off the alley, is shown as an additional space area for the residential parking space. So, as I mentioned, the request is for a variance tonight. We have a resolution available for the Planning Commission to review to approve the variance, which is option 1. And option 2 could approve the variance with modifications. And option 3 could be referred back to staff or the applicant for additional analysis and information, or 4 would be to deny the request for the findings. If there's questions specifically on the variance findings, information that was presented at the last meeting, I have that information available as well. But at this time, this would conclude staff's presentation.
All right. Thank you, Darren. I will ask Commission for questions, and we will go in the order, the following order. Commissioner Togler, do you have questions for staff?
Thank you, Chair Jorgensen. Just a couple. I've got a lot of discussion comments that I'll hold for now on the parking, but I had a question on, staff brought us back some of the information we requested about a bit of the history on this, and there's a piece on page 9 that looks like it was snipped and pasted into the staff report, and I'm curious what the source of that project description is. Was that the staff report of 2017? Or where did that come from?
Yes, this is Darren. That was the applicant's project description that was on the margin of the plan. And that was part of the confusion, is the project description was shown on the actual plan set, and at a with a reduced set of plans, the font was very small, so it wasn't real easy to pick up. But you can see in the project description is where we did find some information about their request for the short-term rentals and the request for having those as part of the project. This project description was part of the resolution that was approved ultimately by the City Council. This project description was part of that approval package.
So, Mr. Nash, was this by reference kind of included in the council resolution, or is this language that was in the resolution as well?
This was language on the project plans that were approved as exhibits to the resolution.
Mr. Kogler, do you have other questions? Commissioner Kogler?
Not at the moment, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Davis?
Hi, I'm here. I had a similar question as Commissioner Kogler. And I think I had expressed, Darren, some confusion. I didn't have any recollection of STRs being part of the debate. And so I too was wondering where this project description came from. And in my little bit of research, I went back to my binder from back then, and the staff report didn't really talk about STRs or short stay suites. Neither did the resolution. I'm looking for the number here, 17058. Unless it was an attachment, it wasn't actually in the resolution. So I think it kind of explains a little bit of my confusion about the dialogue or the debate. So I too wanted to know the source of that project description. And so was it, in what form did the Planning Commission see that? Could you explain that again to me? Because I really do think that's the source of confusion.
No, absolutely. I understand. And remember that at the time this project went through the process, we did not have a short-term rental ordinance, and there was not there wasn't a prohibition against having residential units apply to be short-term rentals. So the issue of whether short-term rentals were included in this project or not was not a specific item that staff brought up as a point that needed discussion. At the time of this project, the short-term rental ordinance was not, I don't think we had any meetings at that point yet. So it wasn't necessary to discuss, because at the time that wasn't an issue that was needed to be discussed, the conversion from residential units to short-term rentals. The project description that you see on page 9 was in the margin of the site plan. The survey and site plan, there was an exhibit that was approved, that was reviewed by the Planning Commission. It was part of the plan packet and reviewed by the City Council, and it is a portion of what is in the resolution approving this project. This language came out of that adopted resolution.
Commissioner Davis, do you have any follow-up questions?
Forgot to unmute, I'm sorry. So Darren, I think I'm hearing you saying this project description was included, but in a small margin. So maybe we didn't catch it.
It was included in the project, and it wasn't that it was caught or not. The discussion of whether there needed to be a short-term rental discussion was, at that time, it didn't apply. So it wasn't discussed specifically in the staff report or at the hearings. I think we have heard that folks did bring it up. However, at the time, it was a use that could have been approved. It wasn't until the short-term rental ordinance was adopted that put us in this position, and is the reason why we're here tonight, is to discuss a variance in order to be specific to the uses of being short-term rentals, if that's what the Planning Commission sees as a benefit to this project.
Yeah, I would, let me see if I'm still, I think using the word caught is probably an incorrect depiction on my behalf, so I do apologize for that. Just a concern about, was there full community input on the prospect of short-term rentals being a part of the project? I think it's just my question. And I think I look forward to talking about, and I think like Commissioner Kogler said, discussing what a viable parking solution will be as we get more into a discussion mode. So that's all of my comments right now, or questions rather. Thank you.
Commissioner Gibson, do you have questions of staff?
Thank you. Yes, I am looking at the parking options, and could staff just please confirm that it looks like the options that are being presented us, in addition to the configuration, various configurations, have added a 3-foot buffer from the stalls that are parked in the alley pointed into the parking lot. Is that an additional 3-foot buffer that did not exist before?
Can you, which parking spaces are you referring to? The 1, 2, and 3?
Okay, so I'm looking at the options that are being presented, and it just the diagram of the way that it's laid out right now. I want to make sure that what's being depicted is if this is something additional, or is this something that is already exists. And if you look at the options that are being presented to us, as an example, option B or option C, you'll see that and they're not numbered at this point, but they're the parking stalls that are where people would come into the alley and park in the alley. If you look at the far left side, there's a notation that indicates a 3-foot buffer between that and, say, parking stall number 4. So
yes, I see that. Yes, I see that.
Is that an additional 3-foot buffer, or is that trying to portray something that already exists now?
This is a 3-foot buffer that I believe the architects have shown they can provide after the comments from the Planning Commission at the last meeting. So I think they've looked at ways to maneuver these spaces around to provide an easier maneuverability for cars in this lot. So the architects will be able to be more specific on the dimensions. Probably be best if they answered your question, but I do see the 3-foot you were speaking of, and I think that was added in order to provide additional width of the parking spaces. Right now, it's my understanding that this area of the side has not been striped for parking. It had been previously, and it's my understanding that the striping had been removed. And at some point, if the Planning Commission approves this variance along with the parking lot configuration, they would then be restriping it in accordance with the approved plan.
Okay. Thank you. That's my only question at this time.
All right, thank you. I have a question for staff. Darren, if you could keep the same option that you have on the screen, but show us the whole area, the whole parking area. And while you're doing that, on this, there's a couple of versions that have a parking space in the lower right corner. In this one, it's numbered 8. That is in front of the trash enclosure. Does the city have any kind of an ordinance that would prohibit having a parking space in front of a trash enclosure gate for access, or is that really an owner management issue?
The parking ordinance does not address that issue. However, as projects come through and go through the process, we definitely try to make sure that things as trash enclosures and other things don't conflict with parking spaces. I will say over the years, there have been situations when parking spaces have been able to be adjacent to trash enclosures, and it does become a management issue that needs to be worked with. The other thing that's tends to be popular too is putting parking spaces in front of roll doors. So in some industrial areas, in order to meet some of their parking spaces, they'll put them in front of a roll door, especially for businesses who don't have that door open all the time, or warehousing. So that's been something that we've discussed as, is that a good design or not? I would say that generally we would want to see the parking placed in, not in front of a trash enclosure door, but we aren't specific to the zoning code that it would not comply. But that is something, though, that through the process, whether it's DRC or Planning Commission, we can comment on and try to get them to design it in a different manner.
All right, thank you. And then also on spaces 1 and 2, they are designated as compact spaces. Do the dimensions shown here conform with the city's definition of an allowable dimensions for a compact space? I believe these are 16 feet, indicated as 16 feet long.
Right, 8 feet by 16 feet is the dimensions for a compact space.
Okay, thank you. Those were my questions. So we will open this up then to the public hearing, and I have a list here of those who are waiting to speak. And first, we'd like to have the applicant representatives give their presentation. We may have some questions. So McShane Nurim, I hope I'm not butchering your last name, the architect for the project.
Hello, it's McShane.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Thank you. Thank you for this moment. So I'd like to just start at the beginning in terms of the striping and where we started in terms of layout and planning and where in the field we ended up, because I feel that is sowing the most confusion, and that will, I think, help answer some of the questions regarding like parking in front of a trash enclosure, or Commissioner Gibson's question about the 3-foot buffer. So I'd like to back up to attachment 2, page 13, which is parking as approved. And in that slide, the problem that exists today stems from the planning process that we went through. If you see space number 2 and the adjacent space to the left of that in the drawing, which is not numbered, the parking spaces align. So the entrance to parking space 2 is aligning with the back end of the parking space that's unnumbered. When you go to attachment 3, which is the as-built plan, the striping in the field did not necessarily conform to how it was planned. So if you see space 2, and I'm now on page 14, which is the parking as-built, space 2 in relationship to the unnumbered space to its left, there's a discrepancy between the end of the 2 spaces. So that poses a problem. We all acknowledge that. So the striping was not done correct in the field. So we've erased everything we could. The unnumbered spaces we've left as is. So the resultant attachments, which are the options A through C, are dealing with the existing unnumbered spaces as is, but adjusting the numbered spaces to reflect what's in the field and how we can maybe be more compliant. So if you look at option A, which is page 15, the 3-foot buffer is pushing spaces 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 downward so that they clear space 2. So it's a result of doing a combination of accepting what's been in the field, but also working with what we have. Speaking to the trash enclosure, we purposely didn't park in front of the trash enclosure for exactly what we're speaking of. It's an operational problem or challenge that may be a problem in the future. So we didn't have to stripe and consider a space in front of the trash enclosure because we could fit it within the parking constraints we had using tandem parking. If we want to get rid of all tandem parking, we have the ability to do so. So if we go to parking option C, which is page 17, we are showing a takeover of one of the commercial spaces, which is space 3, flipping it around so it's a residential use. We are still utilizing space 8, which is in front of the trash enclosure. Now, we need 8 spaces. We are over parked 2 in the commercial. So if we had to, if we wanted to, if we all agreed to, we could take over the space to the left of space 3 in this drawing, which is parking option C. We could flip that around as well, taking away 2 commercial spaces and applying them to the residential. In that, we could remove space 8 in front of the trash enclosure. So we could be back to sort of normal parking. We would have 8 spaces and we would have no tandem. So that is also an alternate option in all of this. All the spaces, I think it was brought up last time that there was a measurement in the truck, and is it really striped accordingly? Again, all of the striping in this area has been wiped out. All of the parking and striping is per code. So whether it's compact or standard, we're following city standard striping. I think that answers everything that I understood from my notes in terms of parking. So I will give up my speech here, and if there's any more questions, just let me know.
Let me run through the commissioners real quick to see if they have any questions for you on this, on the parking. Commissioner Kogler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do. Curious, first of all, on all of these, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Curious on all of these, there is in the middle of the drawing, kind of, if you draw a line off of space 6 and closer to 7, there's a rectangle there that's solid on the left side and dashed on the rest of it. What is that?
So in the field, the way the drainage per the civil drawings occurred, we didn't need to utilize the entire hardscape back surface to drain the site appropriately. So there was a leftover rectangle, which is that dashed rectangle, which was left open, meaning it was softscape. So it's hardscape everywhere but that spot. We dashed it in accordingly now because we could go ahead and create it as hardscape. We could pave it over. We felt it was an opportunity to provide planting to this larger hardscape area. However, in this scenario that we're dealing with, we can go back to what was originally planned and hardscape it. So we left it because it was like a happy accident where we could provide planting to a parking area. But in this scenario, if it helps with backup conditions for parking striping, we're happy to pave it back to how it was originally planned.
Okay. It would certainly seem that you could not plant there because it's going to get run into. I'm also curious from an operations standpoint. I think from what you talked about last time, the intention would be presumably to assign these spaces to various residential short-term units. And how do you manage and require somebody to drive a compact car that's going to park in spaces 1, 2, and 6 if those are corresponding to a specific unit and the user could have a pickup one day and a mini the next day? How do you manage that? And then I also have a concern too. I don't see how you could manage the space in front of the trash receptacles and the gate for that. And so I think your suggestion of taking one more of the commercial spaces and utilizing that just to the left as it appears on the drawing of space 3 is probably required. But how do you handle the management of designating some spaces for some units, presumably as compact?
I can't really speak to the operational aspect of it. But I guess like any parking scenario, we've all run into this. There are available compact spaces and available standard spaces. We choose to park there or not. So operationally, I don't know if I should speak to it as ownership could better, but they may have to identify when you're renting if you are only available at one compact or one standard. They have to make that known to the applicant at that time. But again, that's not for me to really speak towards. If it becomes an issue, or if it is an issue to this council, then we can solve it with this solution by taking over one more commercial and providing another standard space.
We have some other representatives of the applicant who are in the queue to speak next, so maybe they can come back and address that part of your question, Commissioner Kogler.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anything else? Mark, anything else?
No, I'll wait for that further clarification on parking. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Davis, you have questions.
Yeah, two quick ones while the architect is there. Just clarification, visually the drawing appears for space 3 to be more narrow than 4 and 5. Is that just an illusion? Are they the same size spaces? I can't really read. Are the dimensions similar? Can you hear me?
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sorry, my phone dropped. I'm back.
That's okay.
So I missed the last question.
Let me state it again. I'm looking at space 3, and just visually on this drawing, it looks more narrow than, for example, 5 and 6. Is it the same dimensions pretty much? That it's that commercial space that you've taken over?
Correct. It's the same dimension. It's 9 foot wide.
Okay. And my second question, while you're at the mic, I know there's 3 options, and I don't know if you're in a position to say so, but from your architectural perspective, which of these 3 options has would be less maneuvering conflicts if that was a concern of our planning commission?
Of the 3.
Okay.
Let me start by saying all three meet code. All 3 meet parking code design, backup, turnaround, etc.
Mm-hmm.
To the commissioner's comment about the planter, if we remove that and we have no obstruction, all 3 meet code. Now, I think it's more of like a common sense thing. If you look at parking option C, without the tandem, there's just more maneuverability for all aspects of backing up. So option C is the most ample space to back up and turn around and have an easy exit to the parking.
And with the parking formula, I know this is a third question, but while I have you at the mic, and with the parking formula losing 1 commercial space, maybe the applicant could talk on that if that's doable for the project.
From a technical point of view, from a code aspect, it is not an issue. We are overparked by 2.
All right.
It's very difficult to overpark any project, so we're happy that we are overparked. But this is taking away 2 commercial spots. So it's a larger issue, and what's the better? Is it better to have tandem and overpark commercial, or is it better to have more maneuverability and just hit parking requirement for commercial? I would argue that it's better to have tandem and overpark commercial in a scenario such as this, because in all aspects it meets code, whether it's tandem for residential or commercial parking counts. So I feel like having tandem is still a valid option because the maneuverability works. It meets commercial code or residential code. So that's our insight to it. But it is an operational thing, so maybe ownership could talk to the operational aspects and how they feel about having tandem or not, or taking away from commercial.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all I have.
All right, Commissioner Gibson.
I have one question, but it sounds like it needs to be addressed by ownership as a management issue. I concur with Commissioner Kogler's comments, but I'm just going to, the risk of being flagged for piling on, I'm gonna say in the same vein as there's a question about parking lot number 8. I would have the same question about parking lot number 7. I'm assuming that's going to be placarded and limited solely to those people that are handicapped. So if we're talking about where all the parking spaces are going to go, and if there's going to be sufficient parking spaces, that one is dedicated to handicap. So if the idea is that spaces are going to be assigned, I mean, I assume that at least some point there's going to be nobody there that has a placard that could park in that spot. So whenever we get to the management or the owner discussing how to manage this parking lot, I would ask them to address that as well.
All right, anything else?
No, ma'am.
Okay, I have a question. And it's continuing on the question about the disabled parking at that location. Why is it at that location? Is that needed for the commercial access? And does that relate back to the count of parking spaces for the commercial facility, or is that strictly related to this for the residential need? And is that why it's in the residential parking lot?
Space number 7 in option B. Space number 8 in option A. The handicap parking is strictly residential. There are 2 additional handicap spaces for the commercial that exist on the other side of the property. So it is here and located here because it is the most direct access to the residential door. So what's not shown here, but is shown in other documents in terms of planning department and or building department and approvals, is striping. I'm going to speak to option B as number 7. The clear space next to the accessible space, number 7, there will be striping that runs towards the building and to the front door of the residential entry. So it's located here because it is the closest, most direct access to the actual access door to the residential.
Okay, but it is required to be within the residential parking area.
It is. It meets code.
Okay. That was
parking
my
meets
question.
accessible code for residential and for commercial.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Then I believe, was there anything else, McShane, that you wanted to add?
No, I feel like Darren has done a sufficient job of explaining the history and how we're here.
Okay.
I understand the concerns that were brought up with the striping. Again, we haven't been to the site because of what's happening culturally to us now. There was a shift in the field from what was approved and what was planned to what is here. So I'm glad we've flushed that out because now we can have a better parking area in this spot. So we are here to correct that. We're here to correct however you see you want us to go, because we have, unlike other projects, we have a lot of flexibility in the parking and the way we lay this out. So we're here to help. And I'm glad we could have this opportunity to correct it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Next on our list is the applicant representative, Jill Alexander. Are you there, Jill?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Did you want to say some things to us, or you just would? Are you available for questions?
I believe the owner, Debbie Mann Longo, is on the phone, and she has. We're here to answer questions. Yes, for sure.
All right. So, Debbie, are you available on the phone simultaneously? Is that how we're doing?
Yes. Yes, okay. I am. I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, good. Mm-hmm. Thank you. All right. So shall we go straight to questions from commissioners? Was there anything else you wanted to add?
Hello?
Is this Debbie or Jill?
Oh, hello.
Who is this, Debbie or Jill?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, so Commissioner Kogler, did you have questions for the applicants? Ms. Alexander and Ms. Mann?
Yes. Going back to what I offered earlier, operationally, I am interested to know how they're going to ensure that their patrons have compact vehicles going into compact spaces. If there's a way to do that, this distribution potentially can work. I think what was brought up in the discussion subsequent to my initial comments also was something I hadn't thought of, and that's the handicap spot is great. There are going to be times, and probably more of them than not, when all of these units potentially are occupied and there will be an able-bodied car that needs to park in a spot somewhere. And so I think the handicap spot is great, but I'm not sure that it really provides enough parking for these units. Should we be talking about a total of 9 spaces instead of 8 to allow the flexibility for the handicap? It just seems functionally that's a bit problematic just to put a handicap symbol on here and think that's going to be one of the units parking when it really is going to be deficient part of the time. My only other comment at this point would be, I think of the scenarios, I think all of the ones that have the tandem parking create problems. I think particularly option A is problematic because if in trying to scale this based on the dimensions that are there, coming out of space 7, you've got about a 9 to a 9.5 foot window there to back through where you go over that planter area. And there's going to be a lot of fender benders with this. So I know the architect has stated it meets standards, maybe it meets turning radiuses, but from a design standpoint, this is operationally problematic. And so I would lean certainly towards either an option that has no tandem parking or possibly B, but I think the operational side of this still needs some more explanation in terms of how you're dealing with the compact spaces and how are you going to function if one of the spaces is reserved for handicap and you have 8 able-bodied cars that need to park there or owners of cars that need to park there. That's all, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Can I speak to that? This is Debbie Mann.
Yes, thank you. Please do.
Okay, so, you know, obviously we were trying to, first of all, show different options tonight to see what was best suited according to, you know, what you all thought was correct. So we didn't have any one item picked out specifically. However, from an operational standpoint, we plan on, upon booking, we will find out what kind of cars they have, if they're compact, if they're larger, and we'll have specified parking areas for them to park. So we will guide them in. That is our communication program.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Okay. Commissioner Davis, do you have some questions for the applicants?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
And Commissioner Gibson?
No, Commissioner Kogler, in essence, asked my question. I'm still somewhat concerned that I'm thinking that we probably do need 9 parking spaces if one of them is going to be dedicated solely to handicap, though. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Alexander and Ms. Mann, did you have any other comments you wanted to give us?
The only other thing is that, this is Debbie Mann, that we, as a part of our booking policy, we are going to be requesting the licenses of the cars as well. So we are going to have a pretty tight, management over this from that standpoint.
Okay, good. I have Cheryl, the Market Walk manager, on our list next. Have you answered her questions, or did she have separate comments for us?
This is Cheryl with Doric. Yes, I am the business financial manager for Paso Market Walk. And I just wanted to interject that while all of you are doing an amazing job, and that's what we have you there for, to monitor these kind of situations. So I commend you for all of your questions. But I want to step back for a moment to understand that lot, Hometown Nursery, was run down and abandoned and an eyesore to the city for many, many years. And Debbie stepped up with a lot of obstacles, restoring the Victorian house, keeping the 3 oak trees on the property. So it took a lot of struggles on the architect and everyone to design this beautiful addition to our city. And so, yes, it is compromised with a little bit of parking here and there, but overall, we've done our best to present something for the city that's so beautiful and will add to Paso Robles long term. So I just want everyone to kind of consider that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, thank you. We will move on to public comment then, since we've heard from the applicants. Sharon Rosen, would you give us your comments? And if possible, try and limit your comments to about 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I sent in a lengthy comment on my own. I do want to point out that the reference to the short stay suites were in reference to the Victorian home, which I don't know if it was just a run-on sentence, but it was out of the arborist report, is the only place where there was a mention that I saw that there were VRBOs or any short stay suites. I would like to, and I asked this before, but I would like to know if the city council specifically authorized this project with 6 short-term rentals. Yes or no? Was that actually discussed? Because I really don't recall it being discussed. I'm sure that, and I have no doubt that the applicants probably may have thought this all along. But I don't agree with Darren saying that it would have probably passed even if it was discussed. And I'm paraphrasing. Because as I noted a couple of weeks ago, I asked in 2018 if we could have 3 vacation rentals on one parcel, since the city allows us to build 3 units. And I was told no. And this was before the ordinance was passed. So we never applied. The parking, I think the commissioners are doing a great job. They're actually taking the words out of my mouth as far as it coming to code and the compact cars and the handicap counting as one of the units. I think that's probably all I wanted to say. I think I'm concerned that this sets, I know you don't think it sets a precedent, but it's highly unusual. I don't think it's anywhere else in the city, from what I could tell, that there were 7 vacation rentals on one block. And there's not even that many downtown. So I think I am not concerned if there were vacation rentals there. I think there's plenty of business for us all, but it goes against all of the discussions for the ordinance. And I'd be highly disappointed that there's not a consistency for all citizens of this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. And we did receive your letter. The commissioners did receive your letter. Thank you. All right. Wendy McIntyre was next for public comment. Are you back online, Wendy? I understand there was a technical issue. Does staff know if Wendy McIntyre is going to be able to call back.
We are trying to reach her, but she disconnected and hasn't called back yet.
All right. Okay, then are there any other comments or were there any written questions or from the public? I'm asking staff.
This is Ty Christensen, and I would like to speak on behalf of my public persona here, if that's possible.
All right.
This is Ty Christensen. I live at 727 Oak Street. I think that this has all come to light so suddenly because of the long time that it took us to get to what the city came up with for an ordinance. One of the main discussions for that ordinance seemed to weigh heavily on the fact that there was a very large faction in the town that wanted to have VRBOs allowed more in commercial type areas and not in R1 and limited in R2. That was, if I may be so bold to say, is the cornerstone to the argument for people that were against VRBOs. But more importantly, I remember as a citizen going down with my wife to the meeting on site when the city and the owners had I guess it would be a charrette or a seminar discussion to allow all the neighbors to come in and discuss their concerns, the idea of the project. And I know Darren was there. There were some other, I don't remember exactly all the members that were there, but there were other people there along with the owners and lots of people from around the city actually, and from the neighborhood. And the one thing that I remember was the discussion over short-term rentals, and they wanted to be able to provide that as an option when they were building this because they felt that it would just marry well with their project. So that was presented on site at the actual location. And my wife and I remember actually being there and discussing that. At the time, the argument over VRBOs wasn't as hot of an issue. I get that. And I understand where some of the public's coming from, that this variance wasn't allowed in other places. Again, I go back to the reason I feel that we had that ordinance or the argument over the ordinance. And the one biggest concern seemed to be people wanted it more into commercial areas than they actually wanted it in R1 or R2 zoning. I can't think of a better place to actually have a professional controlled environment of VRBOs. And I get it. We're kind of coming into this because we've only had the ordinance for a short period of time. So I know it's a tough decision. I know it's not an easy one, and I can appreciate everyone's concern over it, but I just thought I'd have to reiterate, when we were there at the meeting on site, VRBOs were specifically discussed as being what was going to potentially go over parts of that project. And they wanted the option to go either way. And that was discussed on site. So thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. And I will mute out. Thank you.
All right. I understand that Wendy McIntyre was able to reconnect with us. Are you there, Ms. McIntyre?
Yes, I am.
Okay. If you could give us your comments and if you could try and limit to about 3 minutes, we'd appreciate it.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
Please go ahead and give us your comments and try and limit it to about 3 minutes, if you would.
Oh, okay. I got it. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Hello again, Planning Commission members. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about this variance and the idea that it is being called a variance. I looked into the description of what the variance is per the Paso Robles Municipal Code, and here's a few excerpts from, I guess this is item 21.23.110. The Planning Commission or zoning administrator may grant a variance from the terms of this title when, because of special circumstances applicable to the property, including size, shape, topography, location, or surroundings, the strict application of this title deprives such property of privileges enjoyed by other property in the vicinity and under the identical zoning classification. This property is not being deprived of a right enjoyed elsewhere in that zoning classification or in the city, as a matter of fact. Item number 21.23.120, the variance conditions, states that any variance granted shall be subject to such conditions as will assure that the adjustment thereby authorized shall not constitute a grant of special privileges inconsistent with the limitations upon other properties in the vicinity and zone in which such property is situated. And this, in fact, is exactly what this is. This is a grant of special privileges, and variance is absolutely not supposed to be that. The other one is a variance issuance, 21.23.160. After the conclusion of the public hearing, the Planning Commission or zoning administrator may grant a variance from the strict application of the terms of this where unnecessary hardships or practical difficulties and results inconsistent with the purpose of this title will result, provided, however, no variance permit shall be granted to allow any land use which is not in conformity with the use regulations specified for the district in which the land is located. The zoning ordinance determines that this, hold on, I messed up in that part, but let me move on to another part. What this is per the zoning ordinance is a hotel as described in the zoning ordinance. And I will describe that the definition says a hotel means any building or portion thereof containing 6 or more guest rooms used, designed, or intended to be used, that or hired out to be occupied, or which are occupied by 6 or more individuals for compensation, whether the compensation for her be paid directly or indirectly. So this is exactly what this is. However, unfortunately, it can't be a hotel there because the zoning district doesn't allow for a hotel in that zone. So if in fact it did want to try to be a hotel, it probably couldn't meet the requirements for ADA requirements and fire and life safety that a hotel would require. That's just my guess. The one final thing I want to talk about is the application process. The ordinance that was passed for short-term rentals in 2019 stated that the short-term rental people needed to apply for a permit by July 16th, 2019 for a business license. Now, I'm assuming this owner had every opportunity to do that, and it's my understanding that did not happen. But everybody else who was in similar conditions or had all along had their short-term rentals did apply. And if they hadn't applied, maybe they wouldn't be in this situation, but it's not fair to everybody else who did. And so I don't know if they did. I'm just saying I don't think so. So I just want to conclude by saying I still like this project. I just don't like the fact that short-term rentals are here. I think it needs to go back to what we thought it was going to be and have long-term residential rentals at this location and have a true mixed-use project. And I do strongly encourage you to deny this illegal variance and turn it back to what we thought it was going to be. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I believe that is all of our requests for public comment? And hearing no others, I will close the public hearing at this point. So the question that came up that I have noted for staff from the public speakers is, did the city council authorize this project with 6 short-term rentals?
The development plan for this project was approved with 6 residential units. The project description that was on the Exhibit B, which was the survey and project description, in the margin where the project description is, and is on the resolution that was approved by the City Council, there was discussion of and requests for short-term rentals in that project description. At the time, the council's action to approve the resolution, there was not a short-term rental ordinance that would require this project to be specific about having short-term rentals or not.
All right, thank you. And did staff make note of any other questions from the public that we need to address?
There was a question I heard, this is Lori, regarding the business license, if that was applied for or not by the July 16th deadline. And I can answer that. Yes. So that deadline, the council had put a limit of no more than 250 non-hosted short-term rentals in the all zones other than R1, so majority of downtown. And the requirement to have a business license prior to July 16th was that if you did, you were allowed to apply for your short-term rental and be grandfathered in. So there were certain things you didn't have to abide by, such as buffer zones, and basically however many we got in, as long as they met certain requirements, we were issuing those permits, even if it went above the 250 limit. So after a period of 30 days, or let me back up. So we took in all applications for folks who had a business license as of that date in July. After 30 days in processing them, we took account of how many that we had remaining and were able to open it up to the rest of the public. So we have roughly 45 non-hosted permits available at this time, and that leaves it open for the marketplace to apply or any others.
All right, thank you, Lori.
And then, Madam Chair, the other question that was brought up by Mrs. McIntyre was just the grounds for the variance, the zoning codes outlines of the variance, and that is, what we're presenting tonight. The resolution that is the draft resolution A outlines those sections of the zoning code that were brought up and comes and outlines findings that the Planning Commission could make to make the findings to approve a variance. And that has to do with the size of the property, the location of the property, physical constraints, and timing.
All right, thank you. All right, I will bring this back then to the commission for further comments and discussion at this time. So Commissioner Kogler, would you like to start?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. So the way we're proceeding with this makes a lot of sense in terms of getting discussion and having an orderly fashion, but sometimes I have to hit rewind just for a second because I think there's one more thing that was brought up in the testimony that I would like to hear staff address, and that's the comparison of these 6 units to the hotel definition. If you could elaborate on that a bit, please, and then I'll have other comments, Madam Chair.
All right.
These units were approved for residential units. So the 6 residential units are within the T3F zone, the Uptown Town Center plan allows for a certain amount of multifamily residential units. So these 6 units comply with the density requirements for the T3F zoning district. The short-term rental ordinance allows residential units, whether they be single-family zone, multifamily zone, town center zone, there's the ability to have short-term rental in residential units. So the fact that these units were built consistent with the Uptown Town Center plan in a mixed-use project identifies them as residential units separate from a project that was built as hotel units. There is a difference. It gets into building codes, amenities, the way that they are administered. But in this case, what we're talking about are 6 existing residential units and their ability to be a short-term rental. This was not built for a hotel use.
Thank you. Comments, Madam Chair, on this? I think all of us have a very keen interest in upholding the integrity of the short-term rental ordinance for a variety of reasons. A lot of time and effort was spent on that, and I think it's really kind of running the test right now over the next year, 2 or 3, to see how well that's working, and hopefully it's working well. So I think, at least for me personally, setting aside any of the requirements of that ordinance is something I take very seriously. I would also say in this case, however, there appears to be enough information to me that demonstrates that there was an intent with this project, and this project got kind of caught in the timeline of all of the things that happened from 2017 at least, if not earlier, through present day and the adoption of the ordinance. And I think that speaks in this particular case to the application of the practical difficulty component of a variance. I think there are unique circumstances here with this project, the scale of the project, the units and how they were incorporated originally in the plan, to say that this does not set precedent in my mind for anything else, at least that I'm aware of right now in the city, but truly is a unique circumstance and one that I think the practical difficulty provision could certainly apply. So that's my 2 cents worth on the variance. We really had 2 remnant issues from our last discussion. One was just the one I covered. The other is back to this parking discussion we had. And I think my own 2 cents on that also very briefly would be that we should look at an option C. But as Mr. Gibson expressed first, I think we need to consider that there are really 9 spaces here. Unless there is a provision somehow, and I don't even know if you can do this per code, but that the management could manage space 7 with the inclusion of a sign that you put in or take out, depending on bookings, to reserve that or not reserve that for a handicap space. And again, I'm not sure what the threshold is. I know when I used to design parking lots in another state, it was 1 space for every 55 spaces. I don't know what it is overall and if this one is required, but maybe there's an ability to share that space, maybe not. But one way or another, I think we need to address the handicap parking as a component of this. And I would look at C as being the preferred option that seems to take care of the parking with the removal specifically of space 8 from in front of the trash enclosure doors, because that seems to be totally something that won't work. So, Madam Chair, that's my comments initially. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Davis.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to start first with parking. I'm pleased with the options that we were given here tonight. We all, I think, agreed that there was a problem here, and whether these units, residential or short-term or long-term stay parking, is an issue. I am concerned about maneuverability in the parking space, and I'm tending, like Commissioner Kogler, to lean towards C. I've never been a fan of tandem parking. I think should this end up being short-term rentals, I think it would be a real challenge to communicate to people how to park. I think it would be easier to communicate with a long-term resident what the parking scenario is. So I'm leaning towards C, and I'm not sure about taking out another commercial space, but I am liking the option C. As a commissioner, I feel a little caught in the middle here. I truly remember, like Commissioner Kogler said, there were 3 of us on the commission who sat through the short-term rentals, and I was chair at the time, so I do know the diversity of opinion on the topics of short-term rentals in certain zones. So, I kind of have that fresh in my mind. I truly thought we were talking about residential, long-term, and that mix. Somewhere along the way, it got a little bit clouded, and I'm not placing any blame on anyone. I wish the intentions were a little bit clearer from all parties. So I'm still a little bit confused about that, but I do know that this project, I want it to succeed. I want it to be a vital part of our community, and I'll entertain a variety of options as we deliberate on motions here. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the remarks of my fellow commissioners, and I was not part of the process for the short-term rentals, but an observer, and I appreciate the people that are speaking, taking the time to come forward and speak now. And I respect and admire the passion that people have on both sides of that issue. As I expressed at our previous meeting, I was hoping to get some sort of clarity as to what the intent was on the original project, and I am satisfied myself that it seems that the intent was to have short-term rentals on this project. If that is the case, then although I realize that an ordinance has been passed in 2019, that ordinance was passed almost 2 years after this project was approved, with what appears to be the approval of short-term rentals. So, having somebody go through the process of putting together a project, go through the approval project, start construction, and then 2 years later, be expected to all of a sudden pivot and midstream change the nature of the outcome of the project seems like a very onerous burden to be placing on anybody. So I am leaning towards supporting the variance, because I do agree with staff that there are the appropriate findings, that this is a unique project. It's not like any other project, at least that I'm aware of, in the downtown area or the west side. In regards to the parking, again, I appreciate the comments of my commissioners. I wholeheartedly agree with the sentiment that area that was boxed in, that looks like it was going to be open for drainage, simply does not work. That there's going to be numerous accidents of people backing into any sort of thing that would be put there in the way of a planter or some sort of landscaping. I am also leaning towards parking option C, but again, as has been expressed, I have a concern that parking space number 8 is going to be problematic. Unless somebody's going to go out there every time the refuse truck comes up and make sure that nobody's parking there, I just see that is being a problem, and not something I would recommend, establishing as a practice. But at the same time, I think that there is an issue that I don't know how you count a dedicated parking space as a space. So my thought would be that, at least in resolving parking space 8, that it should be probably placed to the left or south side of parking lot 3. But I'm open for suggestions about what to do with the parking lot 7, which is the dedicated handicap space. And I guess my query would be, is there another space that we could, do something to make sure that we have sufficient parking spaces and really have a conversation about, do we need 8 spaces plus a handicap or 7 spaces plus a handicap? So those are my comments.
All right, thank you. I think as far as the short-term rental issue goes, I believe I agree with, I think the wording that Commissioner Kogler used, that the practical difficulty, I think is very applicable here. I think the intent, the unique nature of this project, both in scale and in the mixed use type of facility that it is, and definitely the timing. I mean, this is, I just don't think that we can apply requirements that came up after the design was complete, approved, and construction had probably even started, I believe, at that point, to cause change. So I am comfortable with the variance regarding the short-term rentals. I still, as it sounds like all of us still share concern on the parking. It sounds like the commission is leaning toward option C to get rid of the tandem parking. I think that the applicant, in explaining that when the units are rented, that they will be assigned parking spaces, they will be asked what kind of car they're going to drive. That will depend, that will cause the managers to determine what spaces they will be assigned, what days they'll be coming and going. They'll have license plates, and they will be checking that to make sure that there's no strange cars parked in there. That makes me feel much better about parking space 8, because ordinarily I would think parking in front of a trash enclosure gate is not a good idea, and it's still not a good idea. But it seems to me that since it's not an ordinance violation, that it is up to management to deal with it. And if management has trouble with their waste contractor, that's their problem, and I'm sure they will resolve it quickly. So I've become more comfortable in this unique case with parking space number 8 in front of the trash. I can live with that. I share the concern, I think it sounds like all of us have, about the handicap space. In reality, as opposed to in code requirements were set, we have 8 spaces. In reality, we don't. And so since there is an extra commercial space over the required, I probably would be in favor of turning around the commercial space adjacent to 3 and using that for residential. I could be convinced either way that the commercial access to that space is more important, or the residential is. So I'm still a little open on if that should be turned around, but those are my comments right now. So any further comments, or would anyone like to venture a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll venture a motion. This is Commissioner Kogler.
All right.
I would move approval of draft resolution A, resolution of the Planning Commission regarding variance 20-001 at 1803 Spring Street, as it's worded in the attachment, with the exception of the reference to Exhibit B, which is the parking plan. I would suggest that in the resolution, the parking plan is that depicted as option C, and that the space immediately adjacent to number 3 be retrofitted for use for the rental, which then could be used in lieu of either the handicap spot or the garbage dumpster spot to provide adequate parking for the site. I'll stop my motion there, Madam Chair, and then I would have a follow-up comment if this receives a second.
Right. Is there a second? Is that Commissioner Gibson?
Commissioner Gibson, I will second that.
All right.
If I may
And
follow up quickly,
is there-
Madam.
Yeah, well, maybe just open it for discussion. Commissioner Kogler.
Yeah. You know, the thing that is readily apparent to me is that this is the easiest parking lot to redesign tomorrow or next week or a month later, because all you have to do is move a wheel stop and you can orient the parking one direction or the other, and for commercial user versus residential user. And I was originally leaning towards saying you shouldn't use 8 since it's in front of the doors. 7, I think, is complicated if it's dedicated handicap, but bowing to the wisdom of the chair, I think if the ownership and management folks can manage these correctly, they can address that in either 7 or 8. But I do think the space adjacent to 3 being dedicated to the residential can make this work. That's all, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Davis, do you have any discussion? Commissioner Davis?
Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties. No further discussion.
All right, thank you. And Commissioner Gibson, did you have any further discussion?
No, I have no other discussion. I concur with Commissioner Kogler's remarks.
All right. May we have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Kogler.
Yes, aye.
Commissioner Gibson.
Aye.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Chairperson Jorgensen.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Commissioners Christensen and Neal abstained and had left the room for the discussion, and they will now rejoin the meeting.
All right, thank you, everyone, and thank you for all those who participated by telephone with us. All right, do we have, is Commissioner Neal back on?
He is.
All right, and I believe Commissioner Christensen?
Present.
All right, item number 2, conditional use permit 20-02, Tobin James Park.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the yeah, this is Darren for the staff report on the.
Darren, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Commissioner Christensen.
Yes, I'm sorry, Madam Chairperson. This is Christensen. I will recuse myself from this as well, so I'll mute out.
All right, staff.
Yes, this is the staff report for the conditional use permit 2002 for Tobin James Park at 1745 Spring Street. This is a site, as many of you know who've been around for quite some time, has been an eyesore. Once was a Chevron gas station and has been vacant for a number of years, with many of the past years going towards the cleanup of the previous gas station use, which has now been certified that it has been cleaned up and is able to be developed. The exciting portion of this project is the request of this property be donated from the owner, Tobin James, to the city to be used as a park. The intent is to create a public park to be dedicated to the community. He's looking to give back to the community by donating the site as a park, providing a public amenity and preventing the site from being developed commercially. And I know he's been working with city management for quite some time to try and make this possible. So this project has been around for quite some time. An architect's firm has been retained for this project. Tinover Studio has been involved with the conceptual designs of this project. This is a kind of an illustrated site plan showing the park and the amenities. Looking up on top here, trying to use the pointer here. So this would be Spring Street. So this would be east here, and then this would be the 18th Street on the other side. So since this project is being looked at as a public park, it really is in the realm of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. They have reviewed this plan. Presentations were made at one of the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee meetings. So back in December, they took action to approve the design of the park, the amenities of the park, and what you see here as or we'll see as the illustrations. The park will be maintained and operated by the city. And really what we're looking at, and our Community Services Director, Julie Dolan, is also in attendance and can kind of speak more to this, but really the intent is this would be operate more of a plaza, not as a standard public park such as the other parks that the city has. There wouldn't be organized programs. There wouldn't be sports practices. There wouldn't be the ability to rent the park out for organized events. Really just a neighborhood kind of corner in the downtown area that can be utilized by people of the community to use. And really a lot of it, I think, will be pedestrian oriented from folks from the neighborhood, folks from the surrounding commercial, and even people walking from downtown able to use it, as well as the neighboring schools and churches. So Julie Dolan had provided an exhibit to the staff report, which kind of indicates what I just mentioned about the park and the plaza. And this is a list of just some different uses in terms of the amphitheater, the picnic areas, the play areas, and then the possibility of how food service would be accommodated or not on this plaza. So really what we're looking for from the Planning Commission is the discussion of the conditional use permit. The designs, the illustrations, the amenities have kind of already been approved by the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee. But the fact that the park is located in the Uptown Town Center plan, and the plan indicates that public parks do require a use permit. That is why we're bringing this before the Planning Commission tonight. And I think the main focus here is the taking a look at the park and whether it's compatible with the neighborhood. I think if we had a park plan here that showed big stadium lights and organized sporting events, I think we could see very quickly that type of a park would not be compatible with the neighborhood. But this park that is more of a passive type plaza, staff feels that this project can be compatible, and we've identified some things in the conditions that would help the use permit and the conditions associated make this park more compatible. So Julia Obenhoff, from 10 Over Studios is available to make a presentation tonight. Again, Julie Dolan is available, and then I believe we also may have Mr. James available as well. So the options that we're looking for tonight are to take in consideration the conditional use permit, or the option of amending or adding modifications to the resolution, refer back to staff for additional analysis, or make findings of denial. I think I'll back up. I think I passed up a slide, And this is the slide related to conditions of approval. So when you look at the attachment to the resolution for the conditions, there really isn't a whole lot of conditions. This is going to be operated by the community services, the Parks and Rec department. So they really have their guidelines of how this park will be ran. But in terms of the conditions of approval and how they might work with the conditioning for the neighborhood, one of the things I think may come up is hours of operation. So right now the condition reads from dawn till dusk, and that's similar to how other parks in the city are operated. However, I know that Mr. James, his intent for this park is to have it available in the evening so people can use it if they utilize some of the other commercial businesses in the area and want to sit and have a meal or sit and enjoy the evening, that the project's been designed to have some ornamental night lighting to accommodate more of that evening atmosphere. And so I think we may want to check in with Julie Dolan on what some thoughts are for the established hours of operation here. The other item is restrooms. Restrooms are a high maintenance issue for the city. I think Julie can go into that a little more, but I think it's self-explanatory that in order to keep maintenance low on this park and costs low, that the restroom just really wasn't an option here for this park. There are some neighboring commercial businesses that I think folks utilizing this park may be utilizing some of the commercial amenities and might be able to use restrooms in close proximity. There was a letter brought up as an addendum on this project by Mr. Rick Reynolds. He owns the commercial project just across Spring Street, and he had some questions and concerns about parking. With the development of this project, it's a very small corner, and to provide on-site parking just isn't part of the program. However, there is on-street parking. The existing parallel parking on 18th Street could be converted to diagonal. There's some parallel parking on Spring Street, but it is minimal. And I think the intent here is for this to be more of a pedestrian-oriented park, not a destination park where folks are going to come and utilize for an organized event. And then again, just to touch on lighting, I think the intent is ornamental lighting, not a lot of obtrusive lights, but there is a condition of approval that the lighting be reviewed with staff just to ensure that proper shielding is occurring and preventing spillage of that light from going over onto other properties. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions from the commission.
Sharon, do we want to have Judy make her presentation as part of the staff report now, or would you like us to have questions for you and then have Judy come up after that?
I believe having Julia go ahead and with her presentation would be a good time, just so the commission can see and the public can see more of the illustrative plans for the project.
Okay, I was talking about staff. There's no other staff who from Parks and Rec who will be addressing the project.
I think Julie Dolan is here and is available to answer questions if we get more into the Parks and Rec operation type questions.
Okay, so questions for staff, Commissioner Kogler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it was all pretty self-explanatory. I was one of the folks on the DRC when this came before us, so I'm quite familiar with it. I suspect our discussion will come back to the restrooms, and I can either make those comments now, Madam Chair, or I can incorporate those a little bit later.
Well, these are just questions right now.
Okay, thank you. No questions then.
All right, Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, much like Commissioner Kogler, I think we'll want to talk about parking and hours of operation. I think I do have a question of staff. I'll start with you, Darren. Maybe it's Julie who can answer this. I used to sit on the Rec Foundation, and I'm just curious, when we had the trails, and I'm not making any comparison to the trails along the river, but how does law enforcement weigh into this? Have they reviewed this in terms of any concerns for enforcement in nighttime or after hours? I'm just curious about enforcement.
Yeah, I think, Julie can step in here, but I think when Julia from 10 Over kind of talks about the park and the amenities, I think the idea is it'd be an open park. The other good thing is it's right on the corner of Spring and 18th and very visible. So I think that if there were concerns of what was happening, I think it's something where the police department could be called to respond if there was a situation that was necessary.
Yeah, and in no way do I mean to bring up kind of a negative, because it looks to be a very, very interesting project, and I'd look to hear more from the from staff as we move forward on this one. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Neal.
I have no questions at this time.
And Commissioner Gibson.
Yes, I have two main questions. The first one that is in regard to the environmental issue, potential issues. I noted that it is exempt from CEQA, but having been a long-term resident, I was aware at some point it was a gas station. And so I asked staff if this had ever been considered a brownfield location, or if they had any information. And Darren was good enough to send me a letter dated October 24th, 2019, indicating that they had signed off on the cleanup, but that there was a requirement that all the wells on the site, if there were any, be deleted or destroyed. And I had not gotten an answer back. So Warren or Darren, could you please confirm that we are in compliance and that any wells on this site have been destroyed?
Yeah, Commissioner Gibson, Warren Frace. We haven't been able to verify today whether the wells were destroyed or not. That is a requirement for the closure by the Regional Water Quality Control Board. If the commission wants to add that as a condition just to verify that that's complete before any construction, that would be fine to add that as a condition.
Okay, thank you. And then in regards to the design, I mean, I think this is just a beautiful design, and I think this is an exciting project that certainly would add a lot to one of our main corridors of town. But I have a question in regards to the limitation of ingress or egress, and I'll point to what looks like it's identified as page L1.4. And my question is that it looks to be like almost like a wide driveway area coming up off the alley, but I could not pick up any information on what was presented of whether there's going to be some sort of fence or some sort of bollards or something inhibiting vehicles or people from coming through from the alley. So could staff provide any information as to what, if any, limitation is being proposed for ingress and egress from the alley into the park?
And I think having Julia in her presentation address that, the project architect would be the best.
Yeah, that would be fine. Those are my two questions. Thank you.
All right, and I have a question within the staff report on page 42, and these are I believe these are the comments from Parks and Rec. Under picnic areas, it says not to be offered by city reservation or fees for organized parties, no alcohol permitting. So I assume that means no alcohol permitted at all ever. That's the way I read that. And then on page 46, on the draft conditions of approval, it lists no alcohol without a permit. So I don't know which of those are actually the recommendation for the draft conditions of approval.
So this is Julie Dolan, and I just wanted to comment that we are sensitive to the location of this park in that it is adjacent to a mortuary and across the street from a future business that will be selling food and drink. So we wanted to be, on the one hand, a more quiet sort of sanctuary, if you will, for people to gather and not to compete with the activity of the commercial areas that surround it. So our intention would not be to encourage people to reserve the picnic area for a fairly loud family reunion, for example, at which they might serve alcoholic beverages. However, in a conditional use permit, to at least leave that possibility down the line that should there be a different view of what is complementary to the businesses, then we would at some point have a procedure or process in place to be able to issue permits for alcohol. So I hope that doesn't sound like I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth on this one, but we just have had great success in let's create a park area. Let's make sure that we are encouraging behavior that makes it a good neighbor and a real complement to that area of town. And it seems at this point that it's unlikely we would issue alcohol permits, but we would have the ability to do so should it seem like that is really an okay activity moving forward. And I hope that clarifies the issue.
Thank you, Julie. Then I guess an extension of that question is on page 42 that I believe are the recommendations you provided. Maybe I'm just not reading. I honestly am not sure what this means, so I may not be reading it properly. But when it says not to be offered by city reservation / fees for organized parties. So does that's saying nobody can reserve it at all? It doesn't really, on the draft conditions of approval, it doesn't really address reserving it or not. So that I'm still confused about that.
So I just put this list together to give a sense of what the city's intention is in terms of looking at this as more of a passive park. So the point is that, again, we don't see this as a major party venue where people will have any sort of amplified music. We see this, as Darren described, as a neighborhood park, a pedestrian park. We had several discussions with Mr. James about the proximity to schools. And so we could see this as an outdoor education area in the amphitheater, for example. So we would not put this, quote unquote, in the city's inventory of reservable spaces as we do the big barbecue area at City Park or the major barbecue pavilions at Barney Schwartz Park. It simply isn't complementary to the neighborhood. So people can informally gather at the benches, but we wouldn't reserve them and we wouldn't charge a fee for that service.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so I think then it is time to open the public hearing. And first we'd like to hear from the applicant. And on our list of speakers, we have that Tobin James is holding and waiting to speak. Is that true?
This is Tobin James here. I'm just listening right now. If I think everything is being brought out that I've already been aware of.
All right.
the special events, I was hoping maybe that there were people keep talking about farmers market moving down there and a few other things. I was kind of hoping maybe it was a little bit more open to, maybe some smaller events. But everything that with this park, and you guys know the city the best, whatever's best for the community, that's what I'll do. So pretty much it's whatever you feel is best for the community. It's an easy decision for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, Julia Oberhoff from 10 Over Architects, are you available to give us an overview of the project and answer any questions?
Yes, and let me start by sharing my screen of a different PDF here. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay. So Tobin brought us on board to help with coming up with a vision and a concept for this parcel. And so we've been really fortunate to have been given the opportunity. So thank you tonight for letting me just share a couple of additional thoughts. This design, as it's been conceived, has been presented to both the DRC and the Park and Rec's Advisory Committee. In addition, back in November, we also hosted a community gathering where we solicited, attendance from local residents, business owners alike to receive some comments. In all three of those meetings, we've received feedback and have been modifying the concept along the way. We've also received some preliminary feedback from the city engineer Dave Athey with regard to the offsite improvements. And so we're hoping that really this concept is, as Tobin says, coming up with a solution that really gives you an amenity that is compatible with and really well suited for the community and the neighborhood. I'm happy to ask any or answer any questions. The one that I did hear from one of the commissioners was, can you see my cursor here, my little hand moving? Yes. There was a question here regarding the paving area of the plaza and how it opens up to the alley here. There's a keynote on this plan, keynote 29, which says that that's potential special event vendor parking. And again, as Julie has stated, the intent is that this park concept is developed, constructed, maintained by the city, and as it's opened and used, its allowed uses or what it's ideally used for might react or respond to what the community sees best fit. At one point, we had talked about maybe there was an option for short-term food truck vendors, or like Tobin said, a small scale sort of farmers market option. And so that's the idea there. But certainly, if that's of concern, something in the way of bollards to prohibit any, conflicting sort of uses in terms of kids, families, or people, occupying the park adjacent to that alley. We can revisit that as the project progresses. But really, what it is a place that's creating a gathering space of different differing natures. So the amphitheater design is more about group gatherings and seating with a central focus. There where you see keynote 13, that's this area here. It isn't meant to be amplified music amphitheater, but more of a gathering space for classrooms or whatnot. There's other areas, for example,
by Keynote 15 and 16. Those are children's play spaces, all of which would be, designed to meet the standards required of fall zones and things of that nature. Park and Recs has given some feedback on some earlier design concepts, and so another concern that was raised was about law enforcement and kind of maintaining this as a safe space. So the park, while there are vertical elements such as the shade structures or play structures, none of these concepts are creating spaces that people could hide behind or hide within. It's really opened. The lighting, while it would be approved, by the planning department during the building permit development stage, would be of such that it maintains a well-lit environment, but also shields from neighboring spaces. There's other elements about the park, for example, perimeter fencing, again, to kind of maintain a sense of safety and security, but also not really creating an enclosed park that provides conflicts between ingress and egress. There's a couple of additional images here that show the overall look and feel of the park. Ample shading. That was one thing that came up from our neighborhood discussion, was making sure that this is a comfortable park, especially during the summer months when it's really hot. So that's what these structures are here. Those are permanent shade structures with swings underneath, movable benches, but that are still fixed, so we don't have to, run into any issues with things being taken away. So all furniture is bolted in place and fixed. One of the featured elements is bringing in a very mature oak tree here, and that's centered on the intersection or the corner right there at 18th and Spring. So we've been discussing that also with Park and Recs, and in terms of the ongoing maintenance and sort of transition of ownership. Another perspective here showing some short-term bike parking, permeable paving throughout the plaza. All of the plantings are drought tolerant, low maintenance, grasses. While the illustration shows a lot of colorful flowering plants, I can go back to the plant palette page if you'd like, or if you have any questions about that. And these are just some additional views showing the park concept. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you so much. It's an exciting concept.
Let me see how I can figure out to stop share. There we go.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, shall we, are there any other representatives of the applicant? Are we ready for the speakers from the general public? All right, so I have on my list of speakers waiting is Sharon Rosen. So Sharon, if you could address this project in about 3 minutes.
Hello again, thank you very much. Actually, this is the first time I've seen the pictures. I don't know how I missed out on seeing some of this. I mean, Toby, it's so much nicer than looking at that lot the way it's been forever. I appreciate the energy that went into this. I do have a couple of questions. What is the cost to the city for maintenance, with or without the restrooms? I know you're still kicking around the restroom idea. And I don't have any problem not having restrooms there, but I think where most people are going to end up going is not to the funeral home and not across the street to the donut place, but most likely, because they won't let you use them, most likely to the Market Walk. And if they're fine with that, then I'm fine with that. It seems like the restrooms that were built down in our city park have been used for improper uses. more than being available to people actually utilize the park for fun. The not used for events, I know you're trying to make a point that there's not going to be specified events there, but there's an amphitheater, and you talked about there being music and whatnot. I just want to make sure that we have applicable parking for those kind of things versus just minor use of a park. What is the capacity of the park? Is there a capacity? I think probably the one thing that mostly concerns me, that it's very easy for this project to be labeled as a non-alcohol use. And I think it's appropriate, being in the neighborhood, being around schools. I know there's alcohol served in other places, and I know, Toby, that's your living, but I think for what I understand you're going for in this park, that it is a benefit to the school system and to, have children be able to come and play there, that it just be a non-alcohol use under any circumstances. I would really appreciate that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanna Anderson. Joanna, are you on?
Hi, hello, thank you. I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We're a homeowner and have a mixed-use property right across the street. So, of course, hearing that the lights are going to be looked into makes me happy, because we do have upstairs rentals and the bedrooms right on the street there. So I just want to be sure that the up projection is also kind of looked at, and we're the only ones that are kind of high there until you get to the back corner behind the City Walk. To touch base on the alcohol, I agree with the previous gal. Limiting it to no use means that it can be enforced. We do have a huge homeless problem in the alley behind our house. Having that patrolled regularly would really make me feel better about that in general. So I want to be sure that the city adds a loop in there more often than it already is. We had that robbery just down the street, and I just want to be sure that that's not promoted in any way. I think that it's absolutely beautiful. The ideas presented here, they look fabulous. I can see it being useful for so many things, but again, who's going to be using it in the evenings when the businesses close down concerns me. So I would like to suggest maybe surveillance. I know the city has it at other street corners. It might detour some of that. The passive park, maybe set time limits on how long it can be used. I don't know if that's even realistic with a public setting like that. But again, I'm worried about people sleeping in the comfortable shaded area and bringing all of their house with them. And that's my concerns for the most part. There was a mention of a free Wi-Fi being provided, and I just wanted to know if that was still in the works or something that was just kind of played around with. And again, I just want to be sure that that maybe can be limited so there's not people watching profanity or something in public. I'm just worried about all of that, but that's it. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other members of the public who'd like to, that we have online for this?
Yes, Ty Christensen, 727 Oak Street. I have an office down the street from this location, and Toby, I have to say that I think it's really a wonderful idea. The concept's fantastic. I do share some of the concerns that were just reiterated on the callers calling in. But I think I have a little bit deeper concerns and just some questions that I don't know I'm sure they've been touched on, but I would love to hear publicly what those are. With this transfer, will there be any deed restrictions with the property for the city? That's one of my first questions. Being that I walk through that area pretty often, especially on my way to the office, and I have 3 dogs and I'm kind of a dog lover, I'm a little disappointed to see that they have no dogs allowed, but I guess we can't have everything. So I would love that to be taken into consideration a little bit, especially since it's something that'd be such a nice place to just kind of stop on my way to the office and maybe back and forth. The other issues I bring up kind of go a little deeper than what we're talked about with Commissioner Gibson. I'm very familiar with phase 1, phase 2 studies. In this case, I as a person of the public would like to know, have we gone down that path, and where the report for these wells, I know they've probably been tested for quite some time and they've probably tested clear. In that regard, my question then is to the city, do we have a mitigation plan for any excavation work that has to be done there? If there are soils to be found contaminated at the site, that would be a cost burden on the city. Do we have we exposed that as far as we can take it? Has the city come up with a mitigation plan in case that does happen? Do we know if there's a budget for that? And then I think that's it. Other than that, I got to say, the concept looks beautiful. I'm not sure about the amphitheater, but overall, I'm sure it'll get a lot of use. And I think that there's been a lot of effort put into this design. And I, for one, think it's a great addition if we can make it work for the neighborhood. Thank you.
All right, are there any? Okay, I think that is all of our callers. So I will close the public hearing at this time. And staff, I had a list of a few questions that came up. I quoted the maintenance cost to the city. Has the market walk management has this been discussed with them that they may be getting some restroom use from this facility? What is the capacity of the park? Will there be free Wi-Fi? And what about the environmental mitigation planning?
So Darren, let me know which ones of those questions you'd like me to handle, and if some are more up your alley. This is Julie Dolan.
Julie, I'll let you handle all of them. Just go right ahead.
Darren, you're a champ. Thank you so much.
No, Julie, if you could, Julie, if you could start off with the maintenance costs, some of those more specific park operation, and then I believe that you indicated that there's going to be an agreement between Tobin James and the City Council. So I think some of the things related to the question about deed restrictions and use might be summarized in some type of an agreement with the council, and then we'll be able to discuss more about the environmental mitigations and testing and remediation that's already been underway. We can finalize with that.
Okay. So I want to emphasize that when it comes to maintaining the park, we just had such a great process in which our maintenance superintendent, Frida Berman, was weighing in at every turn in terms of the kinds of landscaping and hardscape and so forth that were selected for this park. So the city is confident that we have the capacity to provide the low maintenance that this park will require. And while it's difficult to project exactly what the annual fees would be, our best estimate at this point is $40,000 a year, and that would include whatever water might be needed and staff time to maintain the park. In terms of, again, the use, I want to emphasize that we did sort of go back and forth in wondering, should we really be calling this a park, or is it a plaza? Or is it a passive park? It really cannot be overstated that my sense of what Mr. James saw in this gift, this tremendous gift that he's making to the community, is it was an opportunity to beautify that area of Spring Street and not have just yet another commercial building go in. Not that we don't appreciate commercial buildings, but really, as everyone has indicated this evening, this is just an absolutely beautiful environment for people to pause if they're taking a walk down Spring Street, for school children to come and have a nature walk and sit in that amphitheater and talk to their teacher or teachers about what they've learned. That's what we envisioned for this park. So a couple of the callers had concerns about alcohol consumption, and we share those concerns, and that's why that's not our intention at this time. Having said that, if moving forward, it does seem that we could have that as a complementary activity just on the weekends. I don't want to shut down any viable idea, but at this point in time, no, we don't intend to issue alcohol permits for this park. The comment about dogs in the park, many people don't realize that we don't allow dogs in any of our city parks. So we have a dog park, and we do have dogs that are allowed on the trail that runs through Centennial Park. But that is an ordinance, and that's an environmental concern and a safety concern for other users of the park. So that's why that would be a policy there. In terms of the caller's concerns about lighting in the park and the hours of operation, we are starting with, as Darren mentioned earlier this evening, a dawn to dusk approach, which is the common hours of operation for city parks. And again, having said that, if through some more ornamental lighting, we can create a safe environment for people to be in the park after dark, if businesses are open in the market walk and someone wants to buy a gelato and sit in the park after dusk, we don't see anything wrong with that. But we certainly are not intending this to be a party venue late into the evening with lights on poles, that sort of thing. It's more along the lines of what we've done in City Park, putting some ornamental lighting over the playground area, noting that because that's in the center of town, we actually do have parents that bring their children out in a summer evening. So that's what we envision in terms of the lighting, the programming, the hours of operation, the maintenance concerns. And in terms of the questions of capacity, I don't know that we actually have a number of how many people would be allowed in the park at any one time. Those kinds of guidelines are certainly much more open in an open space than they would be in a closed facility. So I don't have a number to offer in terms of capacity at this time.
I had on my list a couple of other things, Julie. Has the marketplace been, has the potential use of their restrooms been discussed with them?
I don't know the answer to that question, so I might defer that to some of my colleagues.
Julie, I can answer that. Warren, staff has met with the owners of the Market Walk. We've explained the project to them. We explained that there are no restrooms proposed in the park, and that most likely place where people are going to go to the restroom would be within their building. And because that would actually help their businesses within the building, they thought that was fine. So they did not have any concerns or objections with this park not having a restroom. And they acknowledge that they may be providing public bathrooms to a certain degree.
Okay, good. And then the last question I had noted was free Wi-Fi.
And we have not recommended free Wi-Fi, although frankly, when we consider what we're currently going through as a community, we have seen that allowing or offering Wi-Fi in more public settings is not such a bad thing. If that were ever the case, we would certainly have the ability to turn it off and on in a way that would coincide with the hours of operation in the park. But at this time, to my knowledge, that has not been suggested as something that we're going to be offering there.
Okay, thank you. So back to Darren and environmental plans, mitigation.
So this site has been under remediation for quite some years. There was a letter that we received from the agencies that indicate that it has been cleaned up. There is some things that need to be followed up in terms of demoing some wells and following up on that. But I believe it's been determined already what contamination may have been there and has already been removed. I don't think that there's more contamination that needs to be removed. However, we will, verify with the with the Public Works Department, with the city engineer, and take a look at the information we have on that. And as Warren mentioned, if the Planning Commission feels necessary to add a condition, that just makes sure that prior to the start of construction of this park, that all the necessary environmental mitigation has occurred. We can add that as a condition if it makes the commission feel more comfortable.
Darren, this is Tom. Maybe I could jump in and add some information. This process of the remedial cleanup has taken several years, and we had the process supervised on Tobin's behalf by Matt Thompson, our wastewater manager, who used to work for the Regional Water Quality Control Board and was a regulator and knows exactly how to go through a process to ensure cleanup of a site such as a abandoned gas station. And so we went through a very lengthy process that took so long, Tobin, and we all got pretty frustrated. But in the end, the Water Board required outside experts to come in and do testing. Based on those test results, they required Chevron to retain a firm to install monitoring wells and also to dig out all of the contaminated soil. And they told us that unless we wanted to absorb the liability, we had to wait until they actually certified and sent us a letter that the site was deemed absolutely clean of all contaminants. And so, gnashing our teeth because we wanted to get going with this wonderful potential park, we did wait for that process, and now we do have that letter on file from the Water Board that has said that Chevron has cleaned the site to the rigorous state standards, and essentially the city is absorbing no liability.
Hi, this is David Athy, city engineer. I'd like to jump in also and talk about the monitoring wells. We issued a permit last October to a well abandonment company. They came into the city right away and have over-drilled the wells and removed those and have patched the road. And so maybe, I'm not sure about the on-site wells, but the off-site wells have been abandoned, and maybe the applicant can talk about that if they have any more information.
Been removed. Yeah, this is Tobin James. Yes, the wells have been removed. I'm 100% sure or 90% sure that all of them are gone.
Okay, Dave, any other comments?
No more comments from the city engineer. Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion or comments from staff? Okay, then I'll bring it back to the commission for comments. Commissioner Kogler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, certainly kudos to Mr. James and the design team that he's retained, and for Julie and staff for bringing this forward to us. This is a really interesting, high design, what I would consider more of an urban plaza than a park, but it doesn't matter what name we put on it. It's going to be a great asset to the city. It's kind of interesting that this and the new project across the street just happen to be on the agenda together tonight, because I think collectively they're going to kind of be the new bright and shiny objects in this city for quite a long time. And I think in being that, they're going to attract people fairly broadly, and people certainly well outside of the neighborhood are going to come in here for a variety of activities. And not to beat a dead horse, but the only concern that I have lingering with this goes back to the restrooms. And I think there potentially is a solution if the Market Walk would make those available. But from what I've heard tonight, I remain, I guess, unconvinced that that's really necessarily in the works, because in the staff report it talks about how it could. And I also heard a term that was may to a certain degree provide accommodations. So it doesn't sound like that's really been narrowed down. And I don't know ultimately if it takes a bit of the city doing some cost sharing with the Market Walk for some maintenance costs, but every effort, I think, to secure access to those restrooms, since we're attracting people, from my perspective, coming fairly broadly to this particular property, as well as children. And I remember vividly when my children were young, bathrooms were an important part of what we did. So with that comment, I am excited about the project. I very heartfeltly thank all of you for bringing this forward. I think it's going to be a great asset for the city. Let's just nail down the restroom thing. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Davis.
Yes, Toby, I think you're still on there. I too want to thank you for your generosity. This has the potential to be just the Beautification of the Year award. I really do thank you for bringing this forward, and Julie for taking this through the hoops. It truly does look beautiful. I didn't have the liberty of being on DRC when this came forward, so it was all fresh information. And if you promise to have the beautiful flowers like in the foreground of that picture, green light from my perspective. I am a little concerned about the restrooms, and I'd like to get some clarification as well. What to me is very exciting, and the more I learned about this project, the more excited I became. I mean, the nearby church can use it. It can fit into the educational component. It's a beautiful blend of community and now our tourist destination next door. So I just see so much synergy. And I do think it will brighten up that part of town, I think, as Commissioner Kogler referenced. Some people had mentioned parking. I still have that in the back of my mind. And I do kind of have a sentiment that if you can truly make it a passive park, maybe start out strict with no alcohol, but you can always back off of that as you move forward. And again, I'm not sure if Toby wants to hear that, but maybe starting out strong and then finding out how this is working, and then finding those special occasions. I truly think this is a beautiful, beautiful project, and I see our role today is just to kind of fine tune that conditional use permit on hours and restrooms and ensuring safety for everyone. I think it's a wonderful project. So that's my comments for now.
Thank you. Commissioner Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the restrooms, I am less concerned about the lack of restrooms. I think the one advantage of the lack of restrooms is it may limit the time of use of the park for those folks that want to be there longer than maybe we would want them to be there. And as well, I personally think that this will be more of a neighborhood park. Walk a couple of blocks to the park and use it, as well as maybe spill over from some of the adjacent business uses. And in that vein, I also think that the parking is less of a concern for me. And I really believe that a lot of the idea behind the Uptown plan is to try to make our downtown and surrounding areas a bit more walkable. And maybe not providing all the parking makes it a little easier for somebody to walk a couple of blocks and maybe grab that gelato or that donut across the street and sit in the park and enjoy themselves for some time. I am, regarding alcohol, less concerned about the alcohol requirement if it is permitted. I like the idea of maybe testing the waters and starting out slowly. But I'm really thrilled with this park. I think it's a very nice design, and I think it complements the neighborhood. And as Commissioner Kogler said, it's kind of the new bright and shiny object, and may very well start bringing the locus of downtown a little further north. So I'm wholeheartedly in support of this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with the sentiments, previous sentiments expressed by my fellow commissioners. I'm somewhat in the middle on the restroom. I recognize that both the cost of the maintenance of a restroom and the cost of putting one in is prohibitive on this size park, but I still can remember, as was stated, having kids or smaller children and needing access to restrooms. It would be great if somehow we had some more clarity on that. In regards to the parking, I actually had some thoughts on that as well. And I'm just coming to the conclusion that it is a fairly small park and a parcel of land. And I think that the parking, or whether you consider a lack of parking or not, would limit the park from actually being overused. As was expressed, I think it will encourage, by the nature of the design and where the location is, a lot of people walking there from the neighborhoods. And so I kind of view that park as seeing a lot of that use. I personally, in regards to the special events, again, recognizing that it's a small park and it's in a neighborhood, so we don't want to have amplified music, but nonetheless, it still comes to mind that it's naturally going to attract crowds for certain events, such as the Pioneer Day Parade, and different dates in the calendar. And I'm not as opposed to having smaller events actually at the park, such as a farmer's market. I think that the site and the design kind of lends itself to that, as long as the events are of a smaller size. The two concerns or the questions that I brought up are still the ones that I am most concerned with. Again, I reached out to staff, and I'm hearing from them tonight, and I appreciate the additional information. I'm fairly confident that the site has been cleaned up, but nonetheless, it seems like it's hanging out there a little bit, that there is a requirement from the regional water quality control board to have a well destruction report filed, and I would ask that be made a condition, as Warren indicated, that we just make that as a condition for approval of this project, that we actually have that in hand. And then the second concern is in terms of putting some sort of bollards or something that would prevent a car or a vehicle from coming in off the alley. And I'm perfectly fine if those are removable bollards. I mean, we see those all the time, whether it's in driveways or parking areas, where that if say there's a special event, we want to allow a vehicle in, or say we need to have access for park and recreation staff, maintenance staff, to come in with a vehicle, that they would be able to do that. But I still think, from strictly a safety perspective, that I'd like to see something along that stretch that's wide enough for actually more than one vehicle to come in. Otherwise, I would fully expect to see vehicles in the park, which I don't think is the intent. And with that, I would just, again, conclude with saying fantastic design. I think most of us wish our backyards looked as beautiful as this, and the generosity of Mr. James is beyond words. So those conclude my remarks.
All right, thank you. I too am completely excited about this. It's a fabulous design. It's an incredibly generous gift to our city. And I'm excited too about, this is another half block closer to the heart of downtown, that I really hope that this project inspires our community over the next few years, not lots of years, to really enhance that connectivity between the heart of downtown to this really flourishing area, because we want people to have a wonderful experience as they're walking back and forth from the restaurants and the park downtown and the tasting rooms, and coming up here and going back. And this is a wonderful, wonderful giant step in that direction of just having expanding the vibrancy of our community downtown. I'm not really worried about parking. I just don't see this as a destination. And again, I think it needs to be thought of as not just a site, but as part of the whole promenade between this location and downtown and into the communities for community use. So I'm fine with parking. It'd be great if it had restrooms. I get the argument for why it doesn't. Cost, functionality, maintenance, and if the next door neighbors have been consulted, and if they look at it as actually an advantage for people to come in and, you know, maybe as they're there, buy something they didn't realize they wanted, I'm fine with that. So I'm all for it. And with that, I think I would ask if someone would like to make a motion.
I think I'll chime in there. This is Sherry Davis. Can you hear me, Roberta?
Yes, you're fine.
Yeah, I think I would like to make a motion here that we approve draft resolution A, approving conditional use permit 20-02, subject to site-specific conditions of approval. I think I'd like to encourage in my motion the dialogue with the Paso Market in providing clear access to restrooms should the need arise.
I'll second that motion.
All right. Moved by Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner Kogler, I believe that was.
Correct, Madam Chair.
Any discussion?
I know I'm the motion maker, but I want my fellow commissioners to think back to that bicycle and pedestrian plan that we passed and how this kind of works into that. I think we've alluded to that, but I think that's another positive here.
Any discussion?
Yes, I have. This is Gibson. I'm not sure whether to pitch in and see if I could make an amendment to the motion or just do discussion.
Just do discussion first, and we'll see if we need an amendment.
Okay. All right. So I'm very concerned. I have a little bit of background in this. I'm not saying I'm an expert at it, but I have a little bit of background with pollution and brownfields, and I would really like to see as a condition of any sort of permits or building is that we actually have closed the file on this site cleanup. And specifically, I'm referring to a letter that, and maybe I'm the only one who has it in front of him or her, but it specifically states that there is supposed to be a well destruction report. And I know that Mr. James indicated he was somewhere between 90 and 100% sure that the wells had been destroyed, and our engineer, Mr. Athey, indicated that the offsite wells were destroyed. But I would like to kind of dot the I's and cross the T's and just know for sure, but as evidenced by having the well destruction report, having it confirmed that it's been submitted, that I'd like to see that as a condition of any sort of permit.
Well, we're still discussing, Commissioner Gibson. I think I heard the city manager assure us that they had gone through the hoops. I'm not sure. I think I also heard, Warren, if you could chime in, that you could provide something when Commissioner asked this question, when Commissioner Gibson asked this question. Was that correct? You could follow up with something? Would that be in due time?
So staff will verify during construction that any requirements in terms of the site mitigation and the Regional Water Quality Control Board closure letter are complied with. If the commission wants to just add a condition just to ensure that, there's no problem with adding that.
Okay. With that being stated, I'd be fine amending my motion to include that for Commissioner Gibson.
Oh, thank you.
And I'd agree
All right.
to that as the second, Madam Chair.
And what is the wording? What is the wording of that additional condition?
Prior to issue of construction permits, staff will verify that all regional water quality control closure measures have been implemented.
All right, thank you. All right, so with that,
I have a question.
yes, Commissioner Neal.
Commissioner Neal. As part of the motion, it was suggested that we work with the neighbors to the north and the use of their restrooms, and I'm not sure how we can condition a project, a private project, because that's what this is at the moment, to work with another private project to provide restrooms. So it's just, I'm a little concerned about that particular addition.
So staff comment on that. I think if this truly were just a private project, that would be a concern. Ultimately, this is a public park. My interpretation of that condition would that basically goes to the city staff to coordinate that for the operation of the public park. So I think because this ends up being a city obligation in that direction for the city to work with the neighboring property owners on this issue can be handled if the commission wants to keep the condition.
I think I was thinking primarily of the property immediately to the north. I wasn't necessarily thinking about all businesses in the neighborhood. I do know that that was my thinking, that you would follow through with your dialogue with the Paso Market.
So if I could, Madam Chair, is the addition, I mean, so if we cannot reach agreement with other property owners, be it the one to the north or across to the east, that this project would not go forward? Or is it just a discussion to try to come to an agreement?
I can tell you, Madam Chair, if I can speak, my intention wasn't to slow up the process, but to encourage staff to continue the dialogue with the Paso Market Walk.
When the motion was made, Commissioner Davis, did you intend to add that as a condition, a specific condition of approval, or were you suggesting that would be like a note to staff in parallel with the motion, but not part of the motion?
It was encouragement, not as an actual written condition, encouragement of staff to follow through.
Okay.
Was the intention.
Does that make you more comfortable, Commissioner Neal?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion? All right, may we have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Kogler.
Aye.
Commissioner Neal.
Aye.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson.
Aye.
Chairperson Jorgensen.
Aye.
So the motion passes 5-0 with Christensen abstaining for conflict and Castillo absent.
Very good. What a wonderful project.
Absolutely.
Excited to see it come about and really exciting. Thank you. Okay, item number 3 on our agenda tonight. Recommendation to the City Council regarding the 2019 annual report on the implementation of the general plan. Darcy.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair. This is Darcy Delgado, and I will be giving the staff presentation for the 2019 annual report on the general plan. I just want to make sure that you can hear me all right.
Yes, we can.
Okay, and I think we're waiting for the screen share to end so that I can begin my screen share. Okay.
So Darcy, you should be able to just share your screen. It should override the,
Yeah.
Here you come.
All right.
All right,
Can you
you're
guys
up.
see my, okay, great. So as you may recall from the years past, this is a requirement of the state to report on the status of implementing the city's general plan. The status report is first considered by the Planning Commission, and so tonight you're being asked to make a recommendation to the City Council, and I believe we're taking that to Council on June 2nd. And finally, a follow-up report will be provided to the state after City Council reviews this report. I will note that a partial report was submitted to the state in April 2020 pertaining to the city's housing production. That's our typical timeline, but with the status of things right now, we were kind of behind on actually bringing the full general plan status report to the Planning Commission. So the general plan status report is broken into two sections. The first section is more or less a thumbnail analysis of where we're at with the general plan elements and all of the different policies that it contains. And the second part is a more detailed report on the status of the housing element. And also our report does briefly mention the status on where we are with implementation of the Uptown Town Center specific plan. And that's something that was directed by the City Council a few years ago. So as part of the process of reporting on the general plan, all of the city departments were involved in updating status action items pertaining to their department, as well as individual programs that affect them. And as I said before, Planning Commission tonight is being asked to review the report and make their recommendation to the City Council before the final version is forwarded on to the state. So in the general plan, there are 237 policy action items, not including the housing element. Right now, we have 139 actions that are ongoing. So these examples of these would be activities that were initiated a long time ago and are continuing, or just generally ongoing activities that occur during the course of everyday business with the community. 67 actions are complete. These might be a specific task that would have been completed. 20 actions are in process, and 11 actions are not yet scheduled for implementation. These might be things that have a budgetary limitation or another reason that they're just not on the front burner at this point. So some highlighted activities from the 2019 reporting year include the update to the circulation element, which was early 2019. The circulation elements update's primary focus was to reassess the planned road improvements in the circulation network and to determine if certain improvements should be modified or eliminated. The noise element update followed, and that was approved around November of last year. A main feature of that update was to help better address complaints from noise sources that have increased in recent years. And key changes of the element included revised noise standards for the community overall, new goals and policies acknowledging noise associated with the short-term rentals, and also new goals and policies specifically targeted at the concert and entertainment venues like Vina Robles. So then staff has also initiated the update process to the housing element, and that began at the end of 2019. And the housing element was last updated in 2014, and it has a 5-year planning period, which was 2014 through 2019. And the update is due for completion in December of this year. So here's a snapshot of housing production that occurred in 2019. We had a total of 179 units that received their certificate of occupancy. And the majority of these were multifamily units. So you can see the 159. 75 units were part of Oak Park Phase 3. And 67 units were at the Blue Oak Apartments. And then as for units under construction, although we show that there were only 26 units under construction, I just wanted to point out that the report recognizes the year a permit is issued and under construction. So although there might have been other units under construction in 2019, the permits might have been issued in 2018 and reported in the 2018 annual report. Or if they were issued in 2019, it's also possible that they already received their certificate of occupancy. So I just want to point out that the 26 can be somewhat misleading. And I will also note that we have a lot of units in plan check right now, 288. So this table shows the regional housing needs allocation, which is also referred to as the RHNA. And this covers the planning period of 2014 through 2019. And then keep in mind that we report on housing and try to hit the state requirements, but the city is not obligated to ensure that the number of dwelling units shown is built within the time frame, since that's something that the private development community helps us with. So the city is only obligated to ensure that there's sufficient land appropriately zoned and served. And as you can see, the city exceeded the requirements for both the moderate and the very low income categories. And then in total, the city constructed 597 units for all income categories. So to help move along the development of housing and meeting the RHNA numbers, the City Council established the Housing Constraints and Opportunities Committee in 2015. And the committee made substantial progress in the prior years to reduce barriers to housing development, including reducing one of the most significant development impact fees, which was transportation fees, and making a recommendation to City Council to reduce those fees as part of the comprehensive update to the circulation element, which was adopted early last year. And although the committee did not hold any meetings in 2019, the next main priority of the committee is to coordinate with city staff on the update to the housing element. And we've already been doing that. The HCOC began meeting, I believe it was January of this year. So staff initiated the update process at the end of last year. It just took a little bit of time to get things going. So far we've met 3 times, and they're slated to meet a total of 5 times, if not more, throughout the year, kind of on an as-needed basis. So this is some progress on the 2 active specific plans. The Beechwood specific plan would provide for approximately 911 housing units over a 234-acre site. And this project is slated to go to Planning Commission and City Council later this summer. The Olson South Chandler Ranch specific plan was recently approved by the City Council, and this project will provide approximately 1,293 housing units over a 358-acre site. And this is just a brief summary of our progress last year, noting that 95% of the general plan action items are either complete, ongoing, or in process. Also, the housing element planning period is complete for the 2014 through 2019, and the city did an exceptional job at hitting the target RHNA numbers for 2 of the income categories, and overall building, more housing than what was required overall for the RHNA target numbers. Let's see, overall housing development did experience an increase in 2019. The certificates of occupancy issued in 2019 nearly doubled from those issued in 2018. And as of December 31st of 2019, there were 26 units under construction, kind of with that caveat that I explained earlier. And we have 288 residential permits either ready to be picked up or in plan check. And lastly, I had mentioned that we have the 2 active specific plans, which will add to our ability to meet the next RHNA numbers assigned by the state. And that's about 1,446 is what I wrote down. And so with that, that concludes my report. I'm happy to help answer any questions that you might have.
Can you hear me?
You know what? I did not hear anything just a moment ago, but go ahead. I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. My earbuds ran out of gas and I had to shift over to my computer. That was a very impressive report and very impressive results. Thank you, Darcy. I'd like to open it up for questions to staff from the commission. Commissioner Kogler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple that are kind of aesthetic oriented, and I also would compliment staff on not only what's been done, but the way this is presented. It was actually pretty interesting reading. Darcy, on page 82, under LU2B, item 1, talks about amending zoning standards and then encouraging property owners to upgrade existing buildings and sites to conform to these standards. The status report there really relates to kind of the action of putting an ordinance together rather than the action of encouraging enforcement of the ordinance or compliance with the ordinance. What's the city doing to try to effectuate conformance with these standards?
And which one was that?
It's on page 82 of our packet, under LU-2B visual identity number 1, kind of in the middle of the page.
Right. So I guess that would be an ongoing action now that we have those standards. So as we get our building permits in, that is just something that staff will, question if we're not finding that applicants are adhering to the design standards that have been adopted.
So the city hasn't contemplated any kind of incentive programs or anything to get people in. You're going on a case-by-case basis. When somebody comes in the door with a plan for something, then you're assessing it against the standards. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay. And then the other one is simple too. And again, it's kind of a theme here. On the next page, or actually 2 pages, 84, LU-2J public art. Just out of curiosity, the status says funding suspended due to recession. Is that the recession we experienced 12 or 13 years ago?
Yeah, so that was actually, I don't know if Julie is still on the line. She may have already left. So that was something in the past that has kind of raised our attention. The status has not changed. I think that it is on staff's radar to take another look at that, maybe get some direction from council.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, Commissioner Davis.
Darcy, thank you for the presentation. I don't have any questions. I just have compliments to staff. I've been on the Planning Commission. I think I'm in my 5th year now, and I actually feel like I feel progress too, and I didn't do all the work. To see the two general plans, 2 elements of our general plan, the circulation element and the noise element complete, that's huge. And that's not even considering all the progress we've made in housing. So I'm feeling the hard work, and I want to compliment everyone in the city for that. I know we've sat in these chairs for meetings and had a lot of dialogue, but it was all with a lot of achievement here. 95% of our general plan activities complete. That's phenomenal. So kudos to the city of Paso Robles.
Thank you.
Commissioner Neal.
I too would like to echo what Commissioner Davis said, and I'm really pleased that we're meeting our RENA numbers for the lower income, which I think is amazing and needed. And I would also like to compliment Commissioner Kogler on the use of effectuate. I actually had to look that up. But thank you for adding a word to my vocabulary, Commissioner.
Anything we can do to help you, Joel?
For that one, I'm sorry, that was good.
Commissioner Christensen.
This is Christensen. It's obviously very detailed. I don't really have any questions. I guess I just had, I take that back. I had one question, actually. I kind of highlighted it out, and I have to be honest with you, I didn't do a lot of research on it. So I was just curious, more than anything else. How is our funding looking like for the city traffic calming program and those items? do we have any kind of update on that? Other than that, I got to tell you, I'm impressed that we've exceeded the numbers, and I like to see that. That gives us greater flexibility on the oncoming project. So thank you again.
Mm-hmm. We'll see. I'm not sure if we have Dave Athey on the line still to answer questions on traffic calming.
So it sounds like Darcy, that Dave's dropped off, but I do know that the city engineer has been putting a lot of effort into road safety and traffic calming efforts. We actually have another grant for that purpose on the next council agenda, and we can have the city engineer provide some additional information on that to the commission.
Thank you, Warren. It's more out of curiosity than anything else, and I was kind of just curious because I was thinking about the way this COVID is going to be affecting the budget and things like that. So I was looking for anything budgetary to kind of get some clarification on. So that's going to be wonderful that in the future they can address it. Thank you so much.
Okay, Commissioner Gibson.
I have no real questions. Again, kudos, Darcy. Thank you for the report and staff. It looks like, as has been said, you've effectuated a lot of learning in just reading through and seeing all the work that's been done. So my hat's off to all of you that have been part of this the past 5 years. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I concur. It's a very thorough report, and the results are impressive. So good for Paso Robles. I do not see that we have any callers from the public for this item. So I will open and then close the public hearing. Do we have further discussion, or would someone like to make a motion?
This is Christensen. I make a motion that we vote to approve the Planning Commission agenda report as provided to us as to today's date.
Second.
I'll second the motion.
Second.
Gibson, I second the motion.
All right. Any other discussion?
And that's clarification that the report goes forward to the city